Hello and welcome to Stephen University. This week we watched Last One Out of Beach City.
Wait, what?
Right, payback. The amount of times we've watched Future Boy Zoltron, whatever the actual name of the episode is, and you've been like, what? I don't know what that is.
Right.
To wind me up, I thought, fuck it, I'm going to fuck with Chris. That's the name of next week's episode. Gotcha.
Fair enough.
Did your heart sink for a second?
No, I honestly, I didn't think because I'd got to the episode by one, I knew the name because we'd very recently recorded last time's episode, and I flicked from Mindful to this one. So I was like, well, I've definitely not got it wrong. Like either Dan's wrong or messing with me, or the order, or I can at least go, well, I've watched it in the list order that I have. So,
you
do you know
don't
what I mean?
check, damn it. That would have been funny.
Yeah. I tend to now, as a rule. I say that and next week fuck up, but yeah.
Well, I tried. No, this week we are talking about, of course, Future Boy Zoltron. I like the idea that people were already mid-typing comments. Dan, I think you might have done these in the wrong order. I like the idea that somebody was halfway through a YouTube comment telling me that I've put them up in the wrong order. And then going, no. Anyway, I couldn't resist doing that. It's been a while. I've been waiting to spring that one on you for a while. But Future Boy Zoltron, what was it about?
Stephen goes to the arcade. Mr.
Cool.
Smiley has a Zoltron machine.
Mm-hmm.
Stephen breaks it. Stephen, for those that don't remember, I'm doing a deliberately neutral summary. No, Stephen goes to the. He's not at the arcade originally.
That was a reference.
else.
That was a reference to last week's episode.
Yes.
For those who don't know, when I said that I can sometimes, when we figured out, I can sometimes gauge Chris's opinion of the episode from the tone in which he says the recap.
Is he getting chips? Is that right? Okay, he's doing something, and then he ends up at the arcade. He breaks the Zoltron, which is a play on Zoltar machine.
That's right.
So Mr. Smiley says it cost a lot of money, even though he's only just pulled it out. But anyway, and he makes Stephen.
It cost a lot of money
originally.
because he says that it's been in storage for a while.
Yeah, but I'd have been like, but you've not been making money from it. Chill out. It was clearly faulty, man. But Stephen decides Stephen is the robot. He gives Lars and Sadie some very specific advice because Sadie wants to go to work and Lars wants to skip. I was like, man, Sadie, just go back, watch a movie. Lars wants to Netflix and chill, Sadie. Give in to those
Take
temptations. Yeah. So he's giving everyone advice, freaks Sadie and Lars out a little bit, but they decide to go to the donut shop, go to work. Starts giving it to all members of the town, various pieces of amusing advice, stuff about the Ronaldo's and his brother's dad, stuff about the stains for the Google, basically a whole bunch of people. And then some guy with this bitchin' British accent appears, and he's all gloom. He's all upset, and he's putting quarters in, and he's saying what happens if I see him, and he's clearly feeling low. Stephen doesn't know how to help him. Garnet, he's like, if only Garnet was here. Garnet's then there. She gives him a blast of future vision. He's seeing the future. He's still a bit confused. Turns out the guy is Mr. Frowny, someone who knows Mr. Smiley. Stephen tells Mr. Smiley about him. Mr. Smiley finds Mr. Frowny. Turns out they used to be a double act, and kind of their thing was that Mr. Smiley would be all over the top and Mr. Frowny would be sad. And they reunite and recoil, and Mr. Frowny laughs. Remembers Stephen visualizes them doing the bit. Friends reunited, Dan. That's what the episode's about.
Yeah. And how did you feel about it?
I really liked it. I thought it was a good town episode. I thought it was an episode that we have often described as a romp episode. Just a fun town episode. I think we were due that. It's funny. I nearly asked last time. Episodes like Stephen and All the Stevens, which to me is a really great example of a town episode. Even though the town isn't in it as much, it's a side story episode that isn't about the Gem's history. I think Stephen and All the Stevens is one of my favourite episodes of that kind of episode. And I was like, man, have we reached a point where like the gem stuff is getting so good and so intrinsic that they couldn't do episodes like that anymore? Would I still enjoy an episode like that, or would I be like, am I at a place where I'd be like, oh no, get back to the gem stuff? And then this episode starts, and I'm like, oh no, this is an episode like that, and it's good, it's solid. It is I think we've had some meh recently. This is not spellbinding, but it's so not meh. It is, because I think, as we've said, every episode is the best episodes give you something. And the Met episodes we've had recently haven't necessarily given us either humor or gem stuff. I don't think it's necessarily humor in this. I think what it is it's giving us an insight into, it's giving us backstory of the town people that we've not necessarily have. I think we are kind of only focus on the gem history, but when we have town history, those episodes don't tend to be spellbinding, but I think they elevate to a good place. There is entertainment wise just as much value, or nearly just as much value, in town backstory as gem backstory.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think it's really neat to get. It's really neat to get an episode that sort of does some character building for a character. Oh, like, you know, the show has done all the character building for like Lars and Sadie in the past, and now we're very fond of them. Mr. Smiley is a character that doesn't really have that, so taking an episode and using it to explore a character we haven't previously done is nothing but exciting to me now, because the show has consistently proven that it can make any character interesting. Do you know what I mean? I think so. When I first watched this episode and I sit down and I turn it on and I realize it's going to be a legitimate Mr. Smiley episode, and you're really not sure for half of the episode what it's going to be about, because Mr. Smiley sort of sets up the premise, but then he's the Zoltron, and it's and then it's like, will he, what's he gonna like? Whose life is he going to get tangled with? And then he meets the mysterious character, who turns out to be Mr. Frowny. But until Mr. Frowny tells his backstory, which again must be like halfway through the episode, maybe a little over, you don't realize that it's all related to Mr. Smiley. So even it's a Mr. Smiley episode that Mr. Smiley isn't really related to for half of it, but very cleverly, obviously, he's part of the setup as well at the beginning, and then comes back once it becomes obvious that it's to do with him. But when I sit down and watch this episode and it becomes apparent that it's a Mr. Smiley episode, I was just excited, because I was just like, well, this show always does really interesting stuff with the town characters. Let's see what they're going to do with Mr. Smiley. And I think the idea is really clever. I do think it might have potentially been born out of a slightly potentially mean-spirited joke. I'm not sure. So there's that line early in the episode, I don't know if you recall this, where Mr. Smiley says, and I'm going to find the quote. Best way to do it. No, I'm not, because I can't find it. There you go. So he talks about his comedy days, and he says, let's see. Wait. Oh, no, I can't even... Oh, this is really annoying. Oh, yeah, so, it was a joke, man. I must be rusty. Been a while since my comedy days. You used to be a comedian? Yeah, but that was a long time ago. What were some of your jokes? I'd rather not talk about it. Like, and those couple lines, to clarify, Mr. Smiley used to be voiced by comedian of questionable quality, the Nickelback of comedy that is Sinbad. And
oh, really?
Yeah, so Colton Dunn voices him now, but Sinbad voiced him originally. So when you hear that line of "It was a joke, man. I must be rusty. It's been a while since my comedy days. You used to be a comedian? Yeah, that was a long time ago. What were some of your jokes? I'd rather not talk about it." Like, I know that in reality it's hinting at the episode. It's more like it also could be taken potentially as a little dig at Sinbad, who is, as I've mentioned, not the most popular comedian in the world.
So how did he leave under a cloud? What was his departure from the show?
I think his departure from the show was fine, I guess. I don't know. It's hard to say. There's no real detail on it. Like, that's the problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, I honestly don't know. I just, when I heard those lines, I honestly started to wonder. But I suppose Mr. Smiley, Mr. Frowny, it all feels by design. So maybe that is just a coincidence and I'm reading into it. But knowing that Mr. Smiley used to be played by Sinbad, a comedian, again, who is for some reason quite popular, but sort of inexplicably so, since everyone says or not everyone, but he is an easy punching bag for people who want to talk about like bad comedy or things that aren't as funny as they think they are, and that sort of you get jokes like that all the time. Like I said, he is sort of weirdly the Nickelback of comedy because they get a lot of shit too.
They do.
So I thought that was interesting.
My big, I think Nickelback's crime, if you're asking, is being too formulaic. Like every album, like I used to like Silver Side Up is quite a good album, but then you buy The Long Road and you're like, oh, it's the same album, and then you get the next album and you go, oh, it's the same album, and it feels like they found a formula, and they do this thing where they tour under the banner of the new album, but they only play like 2 new songs from the new album because they're playing their old stuff, and that for me is a sign of a band not releasing albums and touring with the best of intent. Yeah. Those are my Nickelback thoughts.
And of course, welcome back to Nickelback University. This week we'll be discussing their second album, whatever that was called.
I've just no. I think
I couldn't remember.
No, I couldn't tell you. I think Silver Side Up was technically their third album, but that's the one everyone bought as like their first album. That's the one that had "Men of Hell, You Remind Me." That one. Moving on from Nickelback.
Should we also do the career of Sinbad?
Because no.
Remember that time he did an Arnold Schwarzenegger movie? That was bad.
It's a weird one though, like because it feels so refreshing to have just a really good Town episode after some of the episodes recently, but it's just again one of those scenarios where without going, oh yeah, this bit was good. There's not too much to talk about. Let's talk about the British dude. I thought he felt Mr. Frowny. Felt like it was a new character who felt like no other character on the show.
Yeah.
And that's really cool 4 seasons in to get that. You don't find that in a lot of shows. You get new characters that sort of feel like
they belong
the
there.
Other characters.
Yeah.
Or yeah.
Like they don't feel out of place at all. They're just so naturally an extension of what the show is already doing that they just sort of like yeah. But the downside to that being so the plus side is they fit in really neatly. The downside to that is they're less interesting because they become slightly predictable, or you can sort of guess what they're going to be like because they so perfectly fit the existing show.
Yeah, and you sort of go, are you new for the sake of being new? Whereas this guy just felt so fresh and so different tonally, even like in the animation, like his face was droopy and stuff. All fit the character and all fit the story. But in terms of like things to say that isn't, oh yeah, this bit was good. I really liked having a new character that was so different.
Yeah, no, I think he's a really good character, and I think that the story is really interesting. I want to actually draw your attention to something, though. It is seemingly just kind of assumed that the implication here is that Mr. Smiley is gay and that they were potentially a couple. And I
didn't pick up on that. But
well, that's what's interesting about it. And I'm kind of torn on this one because I think it's really cool that the show can just casually have 2 characters that theoretically were more than just partners, which I did. I'll be honest with you, and this might just be my white straight brain, assuming white straightness. Like, you know what I mean? Like assuming applying myself to the situation in some weird way. I don't know. And if that's the case, then, maybe I'm a terrible person. Who knows? But when I watched this, it never really occurred to me until afterwards, because there's no direct reference to it. So there's 2 elements to that. So first of all, if it's not explicitly sort of stated, can you take it as gospel? If it does seem to fit in that way. Because, I mean, literally, some of the trivia for this episode says specifically, this episode reveals Mr. Smiley was a comedian and is gay. And I read that and went, well, it doesn't confirm that, really. You could definitely take that from it if you wanted to. And I'm not against that. In fact, I would actually kind of really like that. I think that would be a really nice touch. and it gives their relationship an even sweeter situation, and even puts more weight on the questions that Mr. Frowny asks Stephen. Would he even want to talk to me again, and all that stuff. It really does make it, when you think about it, it does seem more like a relationship. And I guess, and then when they talk about their I just, I felt like I, my element of the act, I was making you sadder, and you didn't want to be there, and you weren't happy. You could apply all that stuff to a relationship, but the episode does a really, I guess clever job of making it so that all of the things they're saying could apply to a relationship or to their double act.
Yeah.
So I don't know whether I want to praise the show for being so clever that you can take what you want from it, or kind of berate the show a little for being like, well, no, if you're gonna do it, shit off the pot. Like, if the characters are gay, the characters are gay. That's fine. Make that a thing. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, it feels both really progressive and clever, and also not at all progressive and quite stupid, all in the same moment. So I'm very conflicted about it, because I'm totally on board with the concept of the two characters being in a relationship, but then again, I have this weird thing in my brain where I can't quite forgive the show for not being just that fractionally more sort of confirmational about it. I don't need it to be the plot of the episode. I don't need it to be a big part of it. That, oh, look, these characters are gay. I don't need them to, put a hat on that in that sense. But it would have been nice to have that properly confirmed, even if that element of it wasn't really part of the plot. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, because I think there's something...
Unless I miss something, unless there is something really explicit in the episode that I've just didn't...
Yeah, I'd have to go back or hear the reasoning for people saying that with such confidence, because I really like the idea of it just being like, these just having two gay characters. And that not being the story for once.
Yeah.
I've always, I would love to just, it's been to the point where I nearly wrote a short on it and will potentially. And I'm sure there are films out there that I'm just not aware of. But I'd love to see a rom-com where it was about a gay couple, but it wasn't about the fact that they're gay. Like, it just plays out just like every other rom-com.
Yeah. Absolutely.
But just with two men or two women. And if anyone's got a great one, please
take advantage of that and maybe change some of the perspective, because obviously but don't make it about it being gay, but maybe do it from that point of view. Does that make sense? So you're not lampshading the fact that the characters are gay. You're not making that the premise, but it means you can tell the story from a perspective that we don't necessarily. We don't get in a lot of rom-coms. I would be totally behind that, and that's why I both and I'm not sure how I feel about this.
Yeah, like I wrote a play where two of the characters were gay, but I very deliberately, their storyline was about one of the characters' insecurities, but they weren't insecure because they were gay. They were just insecure separately to that. But I would love to see more of that. And I'm not being like, I wrote, it was a play that was seen by like 50 people. So, but I really would love to see that. And if that's what they've done, great. But I, like you, they didn't do it enough for me to pick up on the fact that these two people were in a relationship. My mind didn't go there. And it's that fine balance of still doing the beauty of that not being the story, but potentially needing to make it more obvious so that it's clear that is the history.
Because forgetting whether the character is gay or not, because you could almost say that's irrelevant. It's never explicitly stated these two characters were in a relationship. That's the issue. You know what I mean? I don't need them necessarily to hang a hat on their sexuality. That doesn't matter. That is in my opinion irrelevant in any situation. Not in any. I mean, suppose if you want to tell a story about sexuality, that's different. But I'm saying,
could be as simple as one of them saying, "But when our relationship ended, the double act ended." Or I don't know,
and I'm combing through the transcript right now to see if we missed something, but I can't. It's really strange. I'm looking at it I'm looking at some of the stuff that Mr. Frowny initially says to Stephen. Was it a mistake to come here? Will talking to him make any difference at all? Tell me the truth. Do I just drive everyone around me away? I mean, these are not explicitly. That could easily apply.
I viewed all of those when we found out about the double act. I viewed all of that as being in reference to that.
And that's tricky. Let me just have a quick look. Let's see if maybe when they talk later, there's something more explicitly said. I'm just trying to see. I guess the curtain really did close on Mr. Smiley and Mr. Frowny. Nobody misses our act, not even him. I don't know why I'm talking to a machine. I'll just get on this bus and leave. And Mr. Smiley's talking about it. I'm just trying to see if I can find some sort of like.
Yeah, totally.
Because I'm looking at it and I just honestly, I can't see. We used to. Oh, I suppose you could maybe see this as a hint. Looking at it, Stephen says he's in town. How do you know him? And Mr. Smiley or someone replies, "We used to have a routine."
Yeah.
But it's Mr. Smiley that says that. It's been incorrectly attributed to Mr. Frowny, that quote here in the transcript. But that's not direct, is it?
No, not certainly.
It's not. I don't necessarily need confirmation of their sexuality, but I really think that this whole episode is way more powerful if you know they were in a relationship.
Yeah. No,
but I can't find any evidence of that so far. I'm gonna keep looking. Is there anything like? I thought this was one of the funniest episodes the show has done in ages. By the way.
Yeah, it's certainly in a while. Yeah, I thought it wasn't. I think there have been funnier episodes. But when he's going through all the town people and seeing their futures and stuff, that's really funny. And there's some great gags at the beginning when he breaks the machine and stuff. I think either the whoever played Mr. Frowny, I mean, presumably he's either British or just doing a stunning accent. Fair play to such a distinctive voice. It's such a we don't compliment the smaller part voice artist enough.
No, he's great. The actor for this is a gentleman called Brian George, who, if I showed you his face, you would have seen him in a million things. I think he plays Raj's dad in Big Bang Theory.
Oh yeah, that dude.
And when he shows up, because of his appearance, he often has a thick accent. They often ask him to do a thick accent because he often plays people of sort of Asian persuasion usually. So like,
didn't he had quite a big? Didn't he have? Oh, I can't remember what the role. But when I saw him on Big Bang, I recognised him from. Was he in an episode of Seinfeld? Am I imagining that?
Yeah, no, he was in Seinfeld. Yeah. I'm looking through his career.
Who did he play in
actually,
Seinfeld?
I think his official nationality is British Iranian. I think, and he immigrated from Israel to India. And his father was born in Iraq. He was raised in Bombay. He's got a really interesting thing. But when he was a year old, his whole family moved to London. So his natural accent is British. Because he attended an all-boys school in England, which is why he's got that, as you described it, what did you call it, bitchin' British accent, I think you said.
It's brilliant.
But I guess because of his heritage, his appearance, he's often cast as Indian characters in shows. I mean, you look through his list and you see the names of his characters, and it's like Dr. Aronov, Arjun. These are. It's clear they more often than not give him those sort of roles, which is a shame, really, because it seems like it. That his natural accent is probably pretty. It's an awesome voice, really, isn't it?
Yeah, it was so good. Who did he play in Seinfeld?
I can look it up. I did see Seinfeld on his credits earlier, though. Boop. He played a character called Babu Bat.
Vaguely recognise that
name. And he appeared in 4 episodes, including the very final one. He appeared in The Cafe, The Visa, and the finale.
Okay, well, most of them came back for the finale, but okay, cool.
Before we move on, by the way, about him, can I add one little other detail, which is really cool?
Yeah.
Just because it's a complete coincidence. Last week we were talking about Avatar: The Last Airbender and the character that Aang goes to get advice on the chakras.
Yeah,
it's this guy.
Is it played by him?
Yes.
That's awesome.
Guru Patik is the name of the character, and it is played by this guy. What a fucking small, weird world we live in.
Yeah, that's crazy.
I thought you'd like
I don't have too much more to say on it. Do you?
Oh yeah, a couple of things I want to talk about. I think I like Steven's place in all this. I like him trying desperately to help others. Here, in a weird way, it feels a little bit like he's still trying to atone for the guilt he feels for all sorts of shit, constantly. And that kind of, I don't know. There's it's very subtle. It's not a big part of this episode, but there's a weird background element of that I enjoyed. I liked the excuse to see a bunch of the townies in one episode where they're not the focus, but
very nice,
you get to see a bit of Lars and Sadie. You get to see a bit of I think does Suitcase Sam show up in this one? I can't remember. Yes, Suitcase Sam does show up.
I can't remember if he did either.
Onion, who has one of my favorite jokes of the episode, which is when he comes with the crowbar. Steven says, I see
funny.
you going to prison. And then Onion comes back, but with a ski mask.
So good.
It's fucking brilliant.
Loved that. Loved that gag.
And it's also got that other great joke about when Steven can't quite think of something else to say to Mr. Frowny, and he's like, "Your lucky numbers today are 16, 47, and W," which I thought was. Yeah. No, that's not what that's. Oh no, Steven repeats that because that's what Zoltron says to him before collapsing, I think.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. Before breaking the first time, so Steven repeats that later when he runs out of things to say. What else? There's a couple of really good moments that were worth talking about in this episode. I liked the way they resolved it, by the way, with them doing their act as well. I thought that was adorable.
Yeah, and really nicely scripted the way they're doing it, but it kind of cuts to a flashback / how Steven would have imagined it. Really nicely done.
Because at first you just think they're talking, and it sort of merges naturally into their act in a way that for a minute you're not sure. Yeah, you're not really sure. For a second, you're not really sure what's going on. Although you do work it out way before Steven figures it out. Which I thought, I suppose that makes sense. There was a really good Mr. Smiley gag. Oh, the gag where he says, if I had a quarter for every time someone asked me for a quarterback. Oh, wait, I do.
I thought that was such an adult joke. Not in its, it wasn't, rude or anything, but it just felt like that kind of dialogue, that joke could belong in an adult sitcom.
Yeah, no, 100% agree. Yeah, it's great. So yeah, there's a lot to like about it, I think. Yeah, it's fantastic.
Yeah, it's really good.
So yeah, a few little bits of triv, Chris, then before we.
Yeah, man, love the triv.
We haven't really talked about the future vision use in this, by the way. How did you feel about Garnet just showing up very conveniently to give him future vision? Just story functional, a little bit convenient, but you sort of explain it away cheaply with Garnet's future vision being the reason she was there at the right moment.
Yeah, I thought that was fine. I think we've seen her do that before, so it was just a device for this episode. Like you say, it was just a story purpose. I think making her sudden appearance, the gag, was quite a clever thing to do. And quite a clever way around that. So yeah, I was all on board for that.
Yeah, I had a flick through, by the way, and I couldn't find anything more direct than we've already discussed. Everything said about their relationship could refer to them being an act. So I stand by my sort of, not criticism as such, but my observation that I feel like it would have been nice to have been clearer that it was a relationship, because I think that gives it more power, and I think that's. Because I think it's a double act isn't as a valuable thing as a relationship to a person. If me and Chris were together, our relationship would be a much more emotionally powerful one than it is as just simply two people that do a podcast.
Yeah, I think it would.
I mean, we're very close friends, but it would give it a different dimension. We would talk about our relationship and our time together with more reverence. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think we would be an electrifying couple.
Obviously, Chris.
I think people would call us Coolan. No, I don't know. No, Dan and Chris. Chan. They call us Chan.
They call us Dish.
But they call us Dis. Dish?
Dish.
Dis.
Doesn't quite work, but it kind of does.
Boolan.
Well, we have to stop. Oh, we've established this a long time ago, Chris. It was destined to be, except for our sexuality.
Yeah, but otherwise, oh mate, we'd be a fucking horrendous couple. Excuse my language, but we would be. Oh, we would bicker. Oh.
Well, Chris, if this thing with your fiance don't work out, and and Nadia and me, I would be willing to give it a shot, Chris.
I think I've had a lot of relationships. Sometimes sometimes mutual, sometimes me. I've been in there's a running joke that like over the course of the podcast, Dan's had one girlfriend, whereas I've had I think 3 or 4 relationships. So there's a running joke that maybe that's a failure. So to kind of be able to go, guys, it wasn't just failed relationships. I'm actually in love with Dan. Is it's a story arc. It's a logic for those failings. Yeah.
So besides that, would you like some triv?
I'd love some trivia to get us out of this weird you and I in an electrifying relationship, where we bicker a lot, but
the sex
the
is
stars
great.
appear when we make love. Yeah.
We both made the same joke, but I went for the more blunt, the sex is great, and you went, the stars appear when we make love. Wow, Chris, you are the romantic, aren't you?
But do you know why the stars would appear when we made love?
Yep.
Because of all the dogging.
Oh my god. Right.
Might need to cut
wow.
That. For American
don't Google what Chris is talking
dogging. Dogging is a British term for people going into fields and making love to strangers, essentially.
That is amazing. Anyway. I don't know where to start. Right, focus, Chris. Focus. Let's focus.
In all seriousness, if Dan and I were a couple, we would not go dogging. Neither of us can drive, for one.
Yeah, that's the biggest barrier to us going dogging, is the lack of a car.
I mean, is there a more tragic image than 2 guys in a relationship just to
walking
make
into
sense
a field
of
where that's happening and being like, "You're right, guys, we're here."
Walking to a field, bickering about Steven Universe on the way. just getting there. I'm just saying. I thought it was a bit of a music video. Yeah, but do you not see? It links to mindfulness. You never listen to me, Chris. Oh, I'm sorry. Drop your pants. Sorry. Right. Take us to trivia.
Oh, man. Wow, that's the best. Right, moving on. The episode's title is a reference to the anime series Future Boy Conan, which Rebecca Sugar has cited as a main influence on this show, along with the original cartoon franchise Voltron, which, of course, got remade recently by Netflix and is pretty good. Recommend it if you've got Netflix. If you like animated shows, Voltron Legendary Defender is great. The title is also likely a reference to the Zoltar brand of fortune-telling machines, one of which was prominently featured in the 1988 film Big. Side note, Chris, I found an old, legitimate Zoltar machine in an arcade in Rhyl, Wales, that was so battered and so old, it's clearly been there since probably the 80s, as were most of their machines. And I got a fortune from it. Would you like to hear my legitimate Zoltar fortune?
Yeah, go on.
When you pull a card and draw a heart, you and your beloved will never part. You are a strong believer in fate. You feel that you have no control over your destiny. Fortunately, you are destined to be very happy indeed. Well, that's good. You've had some trouble, mostly caused by the inconsideration of others, but fate will be kind to you, and you can expect your life to run on a smoother pattern. You are somewhat irresponsible, and that has caused you some hardships. Basically, what they're saying there is you fucked up, and that's caused you some problems. You have a neat.
I mean,
I'm not finished. You have a neat and tidy nature and can't tolerate slovenliness around you. Now, that is 100% true, although I live with Nadia. Since you demand that of yourself and others you always live with, since you demand this of yourself and others, you will always live in a tidy atmosphere. That's also a lie. I live in a shit tip because Nadia's a mess. And then it says, your lucky numbers are 10, 12, 13, 3, 2, and 1. Chris, it also does lucky numbers.
I think it's a shame that it doesn't mention the dogging. I also think, you could... Unfortunately, these things are always so vague that you could spin truth in them. Because you do, arguably, like, what it's essentially saying is you've had some difficulties in the past, but, you got a straighter, more easier to navigate future. And I think you could make an argument that, like, certain areas are less topsy-turvy for you than they were. So, but like I say, they're always so vague that you can tie anything to them.
True. Which is why
Cool.
I think that horoscopes are absolute horseshit. Anyway, Mr. Smiley and Frowny's act could represent the two theatre mask symbols associated with the drama and, obviously the comedy and tragedy element.
Nice.
Pretty cool, like that. Obviously, Zoltron's design, very clearly based on Ultraman, particularly the sort of head element of it. And apparently there's also something called Jumborg Ace in there, which I'm not so sure about. I need to look into that. I don't know what that is, so I had to check. If it's on here, it's probably a thing. But, it's clearly, Ultraman for sure. That is... If you Google Ultraman, you can sort of see the connection.
The resemblance,
It's the third time that Garnet has kissed Steven's forehead to give him a temporary future vision. The other two occasions, of course, were Winter Forecast and Jailbreak. And Steven references that he doesn't want to be banned from another one of Mr. Smiley's businesses, referencing his ban from all the Funland rides in Serious Steven.
Nice. Good triv.
I thought so.
Good episode. I've thoroughly enjoyed that episode.
I did too. And it's a weird. I feel weirdly our discussion of it got a bit derailed by the weird sort of position we got put in, that we sort of like really wanted them to be a couple, but there just wasn't enough evidence for us to both buy it. So we were like both behind the idea, but also disappointed they didn't commit. Do you think that's intentional? Actually, that's a really interesting question. Do you think that's intentional? Do you think they designed this episide to severely hint at that, but not actually confirm it, so they didn't have to worry about the UK fucking Cartoon Network censoring it and pulling it or whatever?
Well, I hope not, because fuck them.
Yeah, me too.
If that's what you want to do, just do it. But I don't feel like it was severely hinted. That's the crux of our sort of questioning. And please, like more than ever, comment below with the arguments for them definitely being a couple, because as Dan said, I'd love the idea of them being a couple. So we're just
struggling because neither of us saw enough evidence to actually say that with certainty. You could certainly come away from this episode with a theory regarding that, and I wouldn't disagree with you, because you're right, you could definitely read it that way. But that's different. That's the equivalent to Chris sort of saying that he thought that Amethyst and Peridot, could be a thing. He's taken the evidence. He's taken what he's seen, and potentially, sort of observed that's a possibility.
Yeah, I'm shipping him.
But that's different to what they're saying here. And I suppose really I'm just going off the shitty trivia page. So I don't know. So
other
maybe it's not really
and opinions.
Yeah, maybe it's someone's just snuck their opinion into the trivia page, and we've made it a whole point of this podcast. But there you go.
Maybe, but like I said, I think we've hit all the areas we would have otherwise hit. So I would love to read the comments on that, and whether people,
especially if someone can verify it's a thing. Because if someone has something that proves that, then I'd be more than interested in hearing about it. But otherwise, I guess that is everything. Are we done?
Yeah, I'm done. Yeah.
Cool. So that is everything for this week, everyone. We'll be back obviously in a couple of days' time to discuss another episode. Last one out of Beach City, which we hinted at earlier. So that's everything for this week. I've been Dan Doolan.
I've been Chris Billingham.
And we'll speak to you next time as we discuss Last One Out of Beach City.